Thank you.
All right, so just to recap, you remember this is really continuation, of the almost of the life of Dion. If you remember, he conquered the Syracuse and expelled Dionysius II, and then the Syracuse, after his death, he only ruled for a little bit afterwards, just for a few years, and then he died. He was assassinated, and then there was a number of tyrants, started to change. It was a very unstable situation, and eventually Dionysius II came back and took the power in 346. But again, people despised him, so he didn't last long, a couple of years. And this is the time when Timoleon comes to power. So Timoleon was, so now we're really talking about this Sicily, the history of Sicily, what was happening. A lot of things happening in Greece at the time, but Sicily is a different place, and many don't pay attention to it. So Timoleon, a son of Timodemus of Corinth, was born in 411 BCE and died in 337 BCE in Syracuse. So he was a Greek statesman and general, and champion of Greece against Carthage in Sicily, fighter against despotism. He's closely connected with the history of Sicily, especially Syracuse. And it starts as when he lands in Sicily in 344 and also conducts the last war with Carthage in 338 BCE. And then he died the following year. So it's only the period of 6-7 years. So just to understand, what the Sicily looked like. So this is the map of Sicily and all kinds of influences there. This is just before the beginning of the Peloponnesian War in 431. And you could see, do you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you see this is the area where the Phoenicians dominate the most, Elimi area. And obviously the Greeks, specifically Syracuse, was founded by a Corinthian. It was a Corinthian colony. It was founded sometimes in the mid 8th century BCE. And of course, you see there are some other, there is a Doric, there is a different kind of, as we know, Corinth is on Peloponnesus, and Corinth is a Doric kind of tribe considered. So they are like Dorian. So these are spheres of influence before the Peloponnesian War. Of course, things started to change, and Carthage started to expand. But I also wanted to talk a little bit, and this is maybe would be a special interest for Ralph, because I took a little step before we start the life of Timoleon, and this is the ancient pre-Greek map of Sicily. And and as you could see, there are 3 main tribes that existed there prior to arrival of Greeks or Carthaginians. We're talking about, this is the beginning of the Iron Age. There is Sicils in the west. This is the Greek names, obviously, Sikiloi. So the island of Sicily called because of that tribe, Sicils. So they dominate, big port of it. And then Sicani and Elimi is a more ancient tribes of people who lived in in Sicily. So
A quick question: is there any
Yes.
trace of their languages left?
Yes, there are some traces, and a lot have been, and I will talk a little bit about this. Not much, but they have came up with some ideas. So let me tell you a bit about it. So Sicils were an Italic tribe. They came from Italy, and they inhabited Sicily during the Iron Age, and they actually brought the iron into the island. There was mostly they were using bronze at the time, and they also introduced the horse, domesticated horse, into the island. But they eventually, when the Greeks started to specifically build colonies, that's where the Syracuse is, and then Catania is around here. So when they started to Greeks to dominate, they kind of fairly quickly merged with a culture of Magna Graecia, which also includes the southern Italy. So Thucydides and a few other classical writers were aware of the oral traditions, well, according to which Sicils had once lived in central Italy, east and maybe even north of Rome, and they were dislodged by Umbrian and Sabine tribes, and finally crossed into Sicily. According to Diodorus Siculus, which is, we know from Sicily, his name Siculus. So after a series of conflicts with Sicani, the tribe that they actually finally established a border along the river Salso, which flows around here. That was the boundary. And now the linguistic studies, I mean, there are traces. I don't know all of the specifics, but the idea is that mainly the language of Sicils is considered to be Indo-European language, while the language of Sicani and Elimi is not Indo-European, it's pre-Indo-European. So this is most likely was probably language similar, like a Cycladic pre-Greek languages, or maybe even a Minoan language, where there is also non-Indo-European, probably the result of mixture of hunter-gatherers and Anatolian farmers migration, and there are many others, but these are two major. So this is the kind of, I thought it's kind of nice to revisit this older tribes that Sicani, well, these tribes don't exist anymore. The Sicani language is non-existent, but they managed to develop general understanding that Sicani and Elimi had non-Indo-European origin, while Sicily were. Any comments, questions?
I know that during the Bronze era, collapse or something like that, in particular, it was attributed to the Sea People. There was, I don't know, there was Sicilians that were considered to be one of the Sea People that invaded or had, I guess, and I think Siciloi was mentioned and in the inscription in Egypt of one of the Sea People, or maybe I'm wrong, but
No, you're right.
yeah.
Well, could be as a result of this expansion. They may have also explored maybe other places. Some of them, who knows?
They're on the list of the Pharaoh Merneptah, Estella, of all the peoples that he killed when he repelled the invasion.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. So I hope you like this piece of it. All right, so now this is the first the piece, and this is, by the way, it's a comparison. As you know, he wrote Parallel Lives, and Timoleon was compared to Emilius Paulus Macedonicus. So that's Emilius Paulus, by the way. So let's read the first part of this. This is the introduction. So I'm going to read this one. So among these were Timoleon the Corinthian and Emilius Paulus, whose lives I have not now undertaken to lay before my readers. The men were alike, not only in the good principles which they adopted, but also in the good fortune which they enjoyed in their conduct of affairs. And they will make it hard for my readers to decide whether the greatest of their successful achievements were due to their good fortune or their wisdom. So this is the Emilius Paulus, and just a few words about him, so we will know who Timoleon is compared with. So Lucius Emilius Paulus has a nickname Macedonicus because he conquered Macedon and actually put an end to the Antigonid dynasty, and he won the Third Macedonian War. You know, he was born in 229 BC. Obviously, as a child and maybe a young adult, went through the Punic Wars. His father, who had exactly the same name, I know Paul and I were talking about this, also Lucius Emilius Paulus was one of the commanders in the Battle of Cannae in 216. This was the worst defeat that Romans ever suffered from Hannibal, and he was one of the generals commanding, and he was killed during that battle. So his son grew up to be also a esteemed general. So and he was still a boy at the time. What's interesting thing about this guy Emilius Paulus, besides being a great general, he had two marriages. In first marriage, he had two boys and two girls, and then he also had a second marriage later on, where he had another two sons and one daughter, so he had four male heirs. And it's really kind of too many for one family to support what they call cursus honorum, which is the order of public offices held by aspiring politicians of senatorial rank. So because of lack of heir in some other senatorial families, he decided to give his two older boys from the first marriage for adoption. And they actually ended up, this happened approximately about between 170 and 175 BCE, and they ended up in a very famous families. One was the Fabia family, and his son became Quintus Fabius Maximus Aemilianus, and the younger boy was adopted by his own cousin, Publius Cornelius Scipio, who was a elder son of Scipio Africanus, the one who defeated Hannibal, and he became Publius Cornelius Scipio Aemilianus, and eventually in the Third Punic War, he is the one who destroyed Carthage. So they became kind of part of this political dynasty. But what happened with later on, because he relied on his younger boys from the second marriage to continue his line. However, they both died in childhood when they were still young, and the line of Emilii Poli became extinct. It's kind of ironic what happened. So I thought it was kind of fascinating. Any
It's
comments?
a good example of how the Romans build a faction. Send their kids out to tremendously influential families. And it's kind of ultimate politics.
Okay. So this is, we just read the introduction. Okay, now we let's go with the one. This is, by the way, Dionysius II, and I just wanted to show his picture because we're going to be talking about him. So any volunteers to read this?
I'll kick this off. After Dion had driven out Dionysus, the tyrant, he was at once treacherously slain, and those who had helped him free Syracuse were divided among themselves. The city, therefore, was continually exchanging one tyrant for another, and owning the multitude of ills was almost abandoned, while as of the rest of the Sicily, part of it was ruined and already wholly without inhabitants by reasons of the wars. Most of the cities were occupied by barbarians of mixed races and soldiers out of the employment, who readily consented to the successive changes in the despotic power. At last, Dionysus, in the 10th year of his exile, collected mercenaries, drove out Nicias, who was at that time master of the Syracuse, recovering the power again and established himself as a tyrant anew.
Okay, so now, as we know, Dionysius came to power again in 346 and ruled for another 2 years. But he was so despised that several Sicilian cities joined the Syracusans because the city was against him and attacked Dionysius later on. And we're going to read about this. And it's proved to be quite successful. And Dionysius was forced back into the citadel. And at this time, in 344, Timoleon arrives and begins his invasion of Sicily.
Greg?
Yeah.
There are a number of references in the text to barbarians. I assume this means Carthaginians.
Yes, I think mostly Carthaginian and maybe some locals, but yeah, mostly Carthaginians. Yeah.
And I suppose here, when they refer to soldiers, there are a lot of references also to Greek mercenaries fighting on both sides, including for the Carthaginians.
Yep. Yes. Absolutely. And occasionally, but later on, Carthaginians, it was against their rules to hire Greek mercenaries, but then they broke that rule. They did it kind of covertly in the beginning, but then later on, we'll see that one of the generals, later generals, basically openly started to hire Greek mercenaries. Yeah. Yes, you're right. I agree. Okay, so so now that's the time. So we know this is the period of instability. There are tyrants changing left and right. Dionysius take advantage of this, but he is too despised to really continue. All right. So anyone want to read this text?
I'll read it.
Okay.
But while Timoleon was getting ready for his voyage and collecting soldiers, a letter was brought to the Corinthians from Hycetus, which disclosed his treacherous change of sides. For as soon as he had sent out the embassy, he openly attached himself to the Carthaginians and acted with them in order to expel Dionysius from Syracuse and become its tyrant himself. When this letter had been read publicly, if any of the Corinthians had before been lukewarm towards the expedition, their wrath against Hycetus now incited them all so that they eagerly joined in supplying Timoleon and helping him get ready for his voyage. And now, with 7 Corinthian ships and 2 from Corcyra and a 10th with which the Leucadians furnished, he set sail.
Okay, so Hysidas, so we would know, was a Syracusan general and the tyrant of Leontini. That's a neighboring city. Just let me go a little bit up to this map here. And I wanted to show you, see, this is the Syracuse here, and this is the Leontini. And also another city, Catania, we're going to become kind of important in our text later on.
Just a comment on the number of ships. 7 Corinthian ships, 2 from Corcyra, and a 10th. So 10 ships. Now, I ran across a reference somewhere else where there was a reference to an expedition in which they talked about having, I think, 300 triremes and twice as many transports. My guess is if they're only having 10 ships, this must have meant they must mean warships here. And these, I suppose, would have been accompanied by a larger number of transport ships. That's just my impression. The numbers of ships are, I think, a little difficult to interpret. Thanks.
Yeah, very, very possible. Even though later on you'll see that the Carthaginians getting sometimes 150 ships, so it's 70 ships. They have tremendous numbers. I mean, of course, this is the what Plutarch presents. I mean, the numbers are not exactly often not very reliable, but anyway, it basically said that eventually once he landed, he had an army of approximately 1,200 people. I don't know if it was all from the ships or maybe he
Well, that's about right. 120 per ship. That's right in the numbers there. So
well,
it's almost Homeric. Odysseus had 10 ships.
Well, that's right. The triremes were pretty standard construction. They had 3 banks of 25 oars on each side. So they had 150 rowers. And I guess the rowers were the soldiers, since they had little room for anything but the rowers. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to say about Dionysius, or not Dionysius, the Hysidas right now, the guy who is besieged Dionysius II in the citadel, and he is also committed some crime as far as the Corinthians are concerned, and it had something to do that after the Dion's death, Dion was, as you know, so very well respected, also Corinthian. So it's happened in 353. His widow Arete and his sister Aristomache, they turned to Hysidas for protection. And Hysidas was willing to help him, but after a while he persuaded otherwise. He was persuaded by the enemies of Dion, and accordingly he placed them on a board ship of a ship bound to Corinth with a secret instruction that they should be put to death during voyage. And that happened. And Corinthians at this point, they hate Hysidas. He is a very treacherous. And now, as you could see, he also united with Carthaginians. That was despicable from the Greek point of view, against, even though they despised Dionysius, but you can't, this is really horrible, uniting with Carthaginians, God forbid. This is, by the way, I'm just thinking, this is before the Punic Wars. I mean, did we see how much Greeks fought with Carthaginian? We mostly know, I mean, not us, but most of the people know Carthaginians from those Punic Wars with Rome, but this is way before. All right, so here is another. That's a large piece of text. So if nobody will step up, I'll read it. Let's see, anyone stepping up? Okay, I'll read it. So Dionysius himself, now grown desperate, and almost forced to surrender, despised Hycetus for his shameful defeat. Before that happened, because I only take parts of it, but what really happened is once Timoleon landed, he led his 1,200 against Hycetus' army of approximately 5,000. And it seems like a very crazy idea. Everybody thought he is destined to fail. However, he found a time when Hycetus' army were eating supper, at the end of the day, because at this time nobody attacks. That's not the rules of the war. And Timoleon attacked them during this time, caught them unawares, and had an easy victory and completely, dispersed the army. And that's why, because I see there is this. So he won like a great victory. I mean, with 1,200 against 5,000, became very famous, and a lot of cities started to fall under Timoleon's banner. They started to support him. So now, again, let me start this. So Dionysius himself, now grown desperate and almost forced to surrender, despised Hycetus for his shameful defeat. That's the one I was talking about. And in admiration of Timoleon, sent to him and his Corinthians, offering to surrender the citadel to them. Timoleon accepted this unexpected good fortune and sent Euclides and Telemachus, men of Corinth, into Acropolis, and with them 400 soldiers. Dionysius, and by the way, Dionysius had about 2,000 soldiers in there, but still. So Dionysius was seen as a private person and in humble garb. He was sent off to Corinth with a single ship and small treasure. So he actually wanted to keep more, but Timoleon said that. And actually, unfortunately, Dionysius died very soon after he arrived in Corinth, and he lived very poorly back then. So, but Hycetus kept the Acropolis of Syracuse under siege and prevented the importation of food for the Corinthians there. He also sent to Adranum 2 foreigners whom he had engaged to assassinate Timoleon. So Timoleon was not in the citadel. He sent his lieutenants there. He was in another city of Adranum, but you see, Hycetus sent 2 people to 3 people to assassinate him. And as they were just on the point of exhorting one another to begin their work, somebody smote one of them on the head with a sword and laid him low. Whereupon neither he who had struck the blow nor the companion of him who had received it kept his place, but the one with his sword still in hand fled to a lofty rock and sprang up upon it, while the other laid hold on the altar and begged immunity from Timoleon on the condition of his revealing everything. So he basically told the whole story, how Hycetus sent them, hired them to assassinate him. So, any comments here? Questions, comments? Okay. So this is the map of ancient Syracuse. And as you could see, there is Ortygia. This is that's what connected with a bridge. This is the island, and this is the citadel, and it had also walls around it that were later on demolished by Timoleon. But at this point, that's where they're hiding. And then there are, as you could see, there is 2 other parts. This part, Acradina, isn't important in the text. You will see, because pretty soon what will happen here. That's why you see it shown that it's been taken. But this map is original. The pink here is the original Syracuse, and the yellow part is the expansion under the Dionysius first, the father of Dionysius the second, a little bit before. Shit, I'm sorry. Okay, so now let's go to next one. So that's just the layout, so we'll know how the circuits look like.
Greg,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm having a hard time seeing, where's number 4 is the Citadel.
Yes.
Is that sort of between Ortygia and the mainland? I don't see number 4 there.
Yeah, I actually looked at this. I don't know why this is happening, but I think the 4 is referred to the whole island. The Citadel is the whole island of Ortygia. The wall were around the island, so nobody could really land there, and that's what the Citadel is, because it's hard to get in. It's already had the defense. You could only get on it from the sea, but then it had a wall there, so there is almost no place to land the troops.
Okay, I was under the impression that the Citadel was a small area on the mainland, but I suppose close to Ortygia. There is, I guess that's number 5, just below that small pink area right next to Ortygia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, my
There
understanding,
should be a number 4 there, but there.
yeah,
I don't see it.
Well, yeah,
There's
I know.
1, 2, 3, 5, 6.
Yeah, I actually also looked at it. But, well, my understanding that it's the whole island, but I cannot swear on it. Okay, maybe we'll look into this later and see if we could clarify this. Okay, let's go to the next piece of text. That's a big part, and it explains a lot of things. So I know. Okay, give another 5 seconds for volunteers, or I'll read it myself.
Okay, I'll read it.
Okay.
Thus Mago, with a formidable fleet of 150 ships, sailed in and occupied the harbor, disembarking also 60,000 of his infantry and encamping them in the city of Syracuse, so that all men thought that the barbarization of Sicily, long talked of and expected, had come upon her. For never before in all their countless wars in Sicily had the Carthaginians succeeded in taking Syracuse. But now Hicetus admitted them and handed over to them the city, and men saw that it was a barbarian camp. But those of the Corinthians who held the Acropolis were beset with difficulty and danger, for they no longer had sufficient food, but suffered lack because the harbors were blockaded, and they were forever dividing up their forces in skirmishes and battles around the walls, and in repelling all sorts of engines and every species of siege warfare. However, Timoleon came to their aid by sending them grain from Catana in small fishing boats and light skiffs. These would make their way in, especially in stormy weather, by stealing along through the barbarian triremes, which lay at wide intervals from one another because of the roughness of the sea. This soon came to the notice of Mago and Hicetus, who therefore determined to take Catana, from which provisions came in by sea to the besieged. So, taking with them the best of their fighting men, they sailed forth from Syracuse. But Neon the Corinthian, for it was he who commanded the besieged, observing from the citadel that the enemy who had been left behind were keeping an easy and careless watch, fell suddenly upon them as they were scattered apart. Some he slew, others he put to flight, and then mastered and took possession of the quarter called Acradina. Having thus supplied himself with grain and money, he did not give up the place, nor did he go back again to the citadel, but fenced in the circumference of Acradina, united it by his fortifications with the Acropolis, and guarded both. Mago and Hycetus were already near Catana when a horseman from Syracuse overtook them and told them of the capture of Acradina. They were confounded by the tidings and went back in haste, having neither taken the city against which they went forth, nor kept the one they had. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So just again, you see, this is the Acradina right here. That's why I said it was important. If this should be a citadel, either whole island or just part of it, then the Acradina is that where he probably put some fence around here and defended it. And so if you remember where at this point, I just want to go to here, Timoleon is at Catana, which is Catania nowadays, and that's how they sailed. You know, this is the harbor, and they sailed all the way to Catana. Probably, they usually go along the sea, and probably were caught right here. So they had to come back now, but because they don't trust each other, the Greeks and the Carthaginians. Okay, we're here. So now the next one is another big one. Any volunteers? Okay, I'll read it. So Timoleon took them and at once occupied Messana, which is another city. Then, uniting them with his other forces, marched against Syracuse, relying on the good fortune and success that they attended his efforts rather than on the strength of his army, for his followers were not more than 4,000 in number. Mago was suspicious of treachery here, though he had long waited a pretext for going away. Therefore, when Hycetus begged him to remain and tried to show him how much superior they were to their enemies, he thought rather that they were more inferior to Timoleon in bravery and good fortune than they surpassed him in the number of their forces, and weighing anchor at once sailed off to Libya, thus letting Sicily slip out of his hands disgracefully and for no reason that the man could suggest. On the day after his departure, Timoleon came up with his forces arrayed for battle. But when they learned of Mago's flight and saw the docks empty of vessels, they could not help laughing at his cowardice. However, since Hycetus was still eager for battle and would not let go his hold upon the city, but clung to the ports of it in his possession, which was strong and dangerous to attack, Timoleon divided his forces, he himself attacking along the river and ordering others under the lead of Isis the Corinthian to make their attempt from Acradina, because they already were holding Acradina. The third division was led against Epipolae by Dianarchus and Demaratus, who had brought the second reinforcement from Corinth. The attack was made in all three places at once, and troops of Hycetus were overwhelmed and took to flight. That the city was taken by storm and fell quickly into their hands. So now we see that Timoleon finally captured the whole city. Just again, we want to look at the city, and we see that, you remember, he was saying he was attacking along the river, and then another attack came from Acradina, and most of the forces probably were in this area of Hycetus. Okay,
Question, Greg?
sure.
Did was Timoleon in some sense a representative of the parent city coming
Yeah.
to save the colony?
Yes, yes, sure, certainly. That's the picture I found of him. That's when that's the picture supposedly shows that when he took the city.
By the way, if I could respond to Paul, yeah, there is a text which says the good Syracusans, the Syracusan people, sent an appeal to Corinth, and Corinth heard it and responded sympathetically, and they chose Timoleon and supplied him with troops and supplies to send back to liberate Syracuse.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to see Corinth still in the game in the 340s BC.
Sure. It was in the game during the Peloponnesian War too, right?
Right,
They
but I'm
sent
saying
it-
that
yeah, even
now,
now, yeah.
now we're getting close to Philip and Macedon and Alexander. So
Oh yeah, oh
you
yeah.
know the
Well,
shadow is on the wall.
right. Okay, so now the next piece. Any volunteers?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Let me get this out of the way. When he had become master of the citadel, he did not repeat the experience of Dion, nor did he spare the place on account of the beauty and great cost of its architecture. But guarding against the suspicions which had brought calumny and then destruction upon his predecessor, he made a proclamation that all Syracusans who wished should come with implements of iron and help in the demolition of the tyrant's bulwarks. And when they had all come up, considering that day with its proclamation to be a most secure beginning of freedom, they overthrew and demolished not only the citadel, but also the palaces and the tombs of the tyrants. Then, as soon as they had leveled off the place, Timoleon built the courts of justice there, thus gratifying the citizens by making their democracy triumphant over tyranny. Timoleon and the Syracusans decided to write to the Corinthians, urging them to send settlers to Syracuse from Greece, for otherwise the land was likely to lie uncultivated, and they had expected a great war from Africa, since they learned that the Carthaginians, after Mago's suicide, had impaled his dead body in their rage at his conduct of the expedition, and that they were assembling a great force with the intention of crossing into Sicily in the summer.
Yes, that's very interesting. What's happened? So Mago was the general. Mago is a very famous name because there was actually a dynasty called Magonides. I don't think he was. Maybe he was related, but he was not a king. But you could see that how they reacted to his kind of run. It's hard to imagine with he had 150 ships. How many? 60,000 warriors, and he was afraid of treachery. He was afraid that he didn't trust Hycetus, so that could be the reason. So now Carthaginians want to regain their hold on Sicily. Also here it shows that as a result of this tyranny, as a result of these wars, the land was depopulated, and they wanted to more people from Corinth to come and settle. Okay.
Can I point something out that I thought was interesting about Plutarch? So Plutarch is referring to democracy in a positive way, like it's a good thing, and that's kind of a change in the way that historians were viewing these sorts of events. So there was kind of a sea change in the idea whether democracy was considered a good thing, a good ideal to believe that had happened somewhere around the year 1. It shifted.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I see. Yeah, I agree. It's very interesting because we know that Plato certainly didn't like the democracy.
Right? And Appian, when he writes of it, also, calls it a mob, and Plutarch all of a sudden is talking about democracy.
Mhm.
Very interesting.
Okay, let's continue. So I'll read this one. Seeing the city thus beginning to revive and fill itself with people, since its citizens were streaming into it from all sides, Timoleon determined to set the other cities also free and utterly root out all tyrannies from Sicily. He therefore made an expedition into their territories and compelled Hycetus to forsake the cause of Carthage. By the way, somebody is doing something. They have to mute. I don't know who is Paul. I think you making noise.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So meanwhile, the Carthaginians put in at Lilibaum with an army of 70,000 men, 200 triremes, and 1,000 transports carrying engines of war, 4 horse chariots, grain in abundance, and other requisite equipment. Their purpose was not to carry on the war by piecemeal anymore, but at one time to drive the invading Greeks out of all Sicily. Major campaign. Syracusans were so terrified of the magnitude of enemy's force that only 3,000 out of so many tenths of thousands could with difficulty be brought to pluck up courage, take their arms, and go forth with Timoleon. Furthermore, the mercenaries were only 4,000 in numbers, and of these, again, about 1,000 played the coward on the march and went back to Syracuse, declaring that Timoleon was not in his right mind and was marching against 70,000 of enemy with 5,000 foot and 1,000 horse. So there were some free citizens of Syracuse and some mercenaries that are in addition. And here he puts the after some defections, some people were scared. He puts the Timoleon's army with a 5,000 foot and 1,000 horse. So that's what they 6,000 against 70 seems. I don't know how true these numbers are, but I could certainly think that there was probably a serious material advantage that Carthaginians had here. So now, and that's really says something to Timoleon. He goes. It's not the first time that he goes with inferior army, and and again, by the way, in the comparison with Aemilius Paulus, Aemilius Paulus operated with the professional Roman troops, while Timoleon clearly has some mercenaries, but mostly these are the volunteers. These are not very well trained or armed troops. These are the volunteers from the city. I mean, yeah, they've probably been through some campaigns. It's not like they're completely without any experience, but still, this is not a professional army. Okay. Now, okay, anyone, any takers to read this one? All right, I'll read it. Then
I'll read it. Let me read it. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. Then Timoleon, noticing that the river was putting in their power to cut off and engage with whatever numbers of the enemies they themselves desired, and bidding soldiers observe that the phalanx the enemy was sundered by the river. Since some of them had already crossed, while others were about to do so, ordered the Moretus to take the horsemen and fall upon the Carthaginians and throw their ranks into the confusion before the array was yet formed. Finally, the storm still assailing them, and the Greeks having overthrown their first rank of the 400 men, the main body was put to flight. Many were overtaken in the plain and cut to pieces, and many the river dashed upon and carried away to destruction, as they encountered those who were still trying to cross. But most of them, the light-armed Greek, ran upon and dispatched as they were making for the hills. Wow, interesting.
So here is what really happened. So this is the battle. It's called the Battle of Cremasus. It was fought on 339 BCE. So what happened there is basically that, first of all, because of the storm, prior to the storm, there was a huge fog that covered the approach of Greek cavalry. Part of their army crossed the river, and under the fog at this point, the cavalry attacked that and put them in disarray. They didn't know how many people attacking them, what happening. They were really thrown. So there was a first engagement was won by Timoleon. But then also when the storm started to really going hard, the wind was from the back of Greeks. So Greeks were going, the wind was in their backs, and it was right into the face of Carthaginians. So they were kind of blinded by it. And also what happened during their crossing the river, because of the so much rain, it caused the river, it was called River Damurias, it caused it to overflow. And because Carthaginians had a heavy armor, they were not only slowed down, they were, a lot of them drowned. So the weather really played for Greeks. And eventually it ended up with Timoleon defeating Carthaginians. They ran, and you know that majority of casualties usually happens during the disorganized retreat. This is the worst that can happen to the army. So he won against all odds. Tremendous battle. Any comments? Any questions? Okay. Anyone want to read the next part? All right, I'll read it. Mamericus, however, the tyrant of Catana, you remember that city, Catana, along the coast, and Hyacetus, whether through envy of the successes won by Timoleon, or because they feared him as one who distrusted tyrants and would make no peace with them, formed an alliance with Carthaginians and urged them to send a general with an army if they did not wish to be cast out of Sicily altogether. Accordingly, a general Gisco, I guess I'll pronounce it as Gisco, set sail with a fleet of 70 ships and added Greek mercenaries to his force. Remember, we talked about this. Although the Carthaginians had never before employed Greek soldiers, they did so at this time. Timoleon made an expedition into the territory of Leontini and captured Hyacetus alive, together with his son Eupolemus, son of Hyacetus, and his master of horse Euthymus, who were bound and brought to Timoleon by his soldiers. Hyacetus then and his young son were punished as tyrants and traitors and put to death. And you remember that not only that everybody hated Hysidas, but he was known the way he executed the wife and sister of Dion or Dion. So he had a lot of blood on his hands. So he was put to death with his son. And after this, Timoleon made an expedition against Mamericus to Catana. Mamericus is the tyrant of Catana. And he conquered and routed him in a pitched battle near the stream of Abulus, and slew about 2,000 of his soldiers, a large part of whom were the Carthaginians sent him as auxiliaries by Gisco. Thereupon, the Carthaginians made a peace with him, which they sought themselves. The terms were that they should keep the territory within the river Lycus, restoring their families and properties to all who wished to change their homes from there to Syracuse, and renouncing their alliance with the tyrants. So this kind of ended in the defeat of Hysidas. This happened in 338 BCE, and this is a very important treaty that eventually was signed and agreed upon, by which Carthage was confined to only western side of Sicily, of the Halicus.
Greg,
Yes.
do you have a map that shows the river Lycus?
I'm not sure, but you know what? I can only go to that map that I had in the beginning and see because it should be somewhere. It should be somewhere here, because they were confined to only this western part. Well, wait a second. Let's go a little further. This one. I don't know which one of them was Lycus, but I would imagine it should be this one. I'm not sure.
They're almost driven off the island.
Yeah. So at this point,
I've looked it up on the map.
Yeah.
I guess it's also or at the same as Platani, which is
Right.
northwest of Agrigentum. So I guess that
so it
river.
could be this one, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay. All right. All right. So. Okay, so that's and the most important thing that this agreement, like he managed to be such a fortunate, they thought, or also such a excellent general. He won so many battles against. He destroyed all the tyrants, and the Carthaginians at this point decided not to confront him. He had a lot of esteem. And they signed the treaty now, and if that's the river, so that kind of put them west of this territory, and so it was a major achievement. Yeah, it says west of Halicus Patani, and undertook so actually after this, most of the tyrants in all Sicilian cities were either killed by their own population or expelled, because at this point they were free to ask Timoleon for support. So as a result, so he got rid of all tyrants on Sicily, cleared Sicily of tyranny. That's what he's known for. And also the treaty gave the Greeks of Sicily many years of peace, restored prosperity, rule of law, and safety from Carthage. So that's his major achievement. Okay, let's go to the later Okay. All right. So anybody want to read this part?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
In this manner, then, did Timoleon extirpate the tyrannies and put a stop to their wars. He found the whole island reduced to a savage state by its troubles and hated by its inhabitants, but he made it so civilized and so desirable in the eyes of all men that others came by sea to dwell in the places from which their own citizens used to run away before. Agrigentum and Gela, for instance, great cities which had been ruined and depopulated by the Carthaginians after the Attic War, were repeopled at this time. I guess the Attic War is the Peloponnesian War.
Yep. No. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
That's when the Athenians were on Sicily. If we compare the generalship of Epaminondas and Agesilaus, which in both cases was full of toil and bitter struggles, with that of Timoleon, which was exercised with much ease as well as glory, it appears to men of just and careful reasoning a product not of fortune, but of fortunate valor. And yet all his successes were ascribed by him to fortune. For in his letters to his friends at home and in his public addresses to the Syracusans, he often said that he was thankful to God, who, desiring to save Sicily, gave him the name and title of its savior. For he did not return to Corinth, nor did he take part in the disturbances of Greece or expose himself to the jealousy of his fellow citizens, the rock on which most generals, in their insatiable greed for honors and power, make shipwreck. But he remained in Sicily, enjoying the blessings of his own creation, the greatest of which was the sight of so many cities and myriads of people whose happiness was due to him.
Okay, so what's interesting here, he compares to various generals, and I just when I was reading it, I just wanted to make a note. What was happening in Greece at this time? Because this is Sicily, and this is happened in 338, and believe it or not, the Fourth Sacred War started in 339. And ended in the Battle of Chaeronea exactly in the same year, 338, where Philip II of Macedon defeated an alliance of Greek city-states, Athens and Thebes, and kind of like put an end of Greek independence, I guess. So that's what was happening. So all of this league that was fighting the Greek army that fought, so we know that fought Philip, were besides Athens and Thebes, were also armies from Achaia, which is on Peloponnesus, Corinth, Chalcis, Epidaurus, Megara, Troezen, so Troezen and Attica, but most of the others in Peloponnesus, and they suffered a major defeat. And after this, League of Corinth was formed by Philip in 337 BC at the Congress that he organized. So that's what Greece is going through. Meanwhile, Timoleon is exactly at the same time in Sicily doing his exploits. So Timoleon established a new Syracusan constitution. It was described at the time as democratic. However, for a short time, he did have wide powers equivalent to a supreme commander. He invited settlers from mainland Greece to assist in repopulation of Syracuse and other Sicilian cities. And during this period, Greek Sicily enjoyed a recovery in its economy and culture. So it's like really, he created the golden age in Sicily by this. But he actually didn't really rule. He created democracy, was never became a tyrant. He was already an old man, He died like a year later. Lived as a private citizen, but very well respected. So I'm gonna read this last part. Cherished in old age amid such honor and goodwill, like a common father, a slight coast cooperated with his great age to bring him to his end. And finally, when the bier and being placed upon the funeral pyre, Demetrius, who had the loudest voice of any herald of the time, read from the manuscript of the following decree. We're talking about the funeral pyre of Timoleon. And that's what people wrote, that was the decree. By the people of Syracuse, Timoleon, son of Timodemus, from Corinth, is here buried at the public cost of 200 minas, and is honored for all times with annual contests, musical, equestrian, and gymnastics, because he overthrew the tyrants, subdued the barbarians, reopened the largest of the devastated cities, and then restored their laws to the Greeks of Sicily. So Timoleon, and that's his last thing. So Timoleon retired into private life after his goals had been accomplished, and he remained almost universally admired for his brilliant victories, moderation, and the restoration of democracy after half a century of tyranny, suffering near economic collapse, turmoil, and depopulation during that tyranny times. However, even after his retirement, so great was the esteem of his countrymen that when important issues were under discussion, the by now blind Timoleon was carried to the assembly to give his opinion, which was usually accepted. And this is the blind Timoleon sitting here. This is the last kind of picture, at the assembly, because he was so he was so esteemed by his countrymen. Yeah, so this is it. I don't know if I maybe missed some parts, but that's we went through this part of the Sicilian history, really parallel with advances of Philip II, and nobody even thinking about Sicily at this time, but there are great things happening here, and this became a period of great prosperity and safety.
I must say, it really begs for a movie. Doesn't this really? He's more like a modern day sensibility than any of the people that they actually make movies about.
Yeah, apparently,
fighter for democracy and freedom.
Right, absolutely. He is really. You see, at least Dion, he decided, because Dion was a pupil of Plato, and he kind of didn't trust the democracy, so he decided to be enlightened monarch for a little while. He continued to rule as a tyrant, even though he was a great tyrant, but still he didn't change anything. Timoleon, was just the opposite. He didn't want to rule as a tyrant at all. He set up the democracy, and he got rid of all the tyrants on the whole island.
Is there any other ancient source that mentions Timoleon?
Doesn't Plutarch?
Well, aside from Plutarch, is there anybody else that we know about Timoleon from?
Not sure. I don't.
I just say that because it's such a great story.
There must be some more people. He must be mentioned, somewhere. Maybe we should look it up. I just didn't.
But also, I think that the Plutarch himself has a very pro-Greek agenda in his writing. You know, he's writing under the Romans, and he has to be very, very polite, but he also wants to, you know, in his heart, he wants to glorify the Greeks.
Yes, yes, because a lot of Romans don't know that much about Greeks, you know, and he wants to because a lot of people read him, and he wants to show, yeah, that there were great Greeks too, and I can imagine that maybe very few people knew about some of those Greeks in Roman times, you know,
According
like for
to
instance, a lot of us. I mean, I read Plutarch before, like many years ago. I read all of his parallel lives. So, but I would imagine that, like, we all here lovers of history, but I mean, I would imagine people who are just generally acquainted with Greek or Roman history would probably never heard of this.
well, according to Wikipedia, Cornelius Nepos wrote about Timoleon and Diodorus Siculus. So
Yeah, Diodorus
Diodorus
Siculus.
Siculus, okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he even actually even yeah, that's right. Yeah, Diodorus Siculus. Yes, I remember.
Okay,
that.
so that's interesting, because the Nepos doesn't survive, right? I think that we only know about Nepos from, you know, quotations and stuff, but Diodorus, we have
Yeah, he is a
substantial work.
Sicilian. Yeah, he is a Sicilian historian. I mean, he's
Greek.
got upheld. Yeah, Greek, but he's from Sicily.
Yeah.
now
I mean, the other thing to realize is that at this point, Syracuse was the biggest city in the Greek world.
Yeah, probably.
what
But
was
you see, it was almost depopulated, and he asked the people from Corinth and maybe some other people from surrounding territories. The whole island was depopulated because of the constant wars and the whatever else, disease, hunger. You know, it's
I mean, he did such a good job, right? I guess Plutarch explaining Greeks to Romans that apparently, and I don't know if there was before or after, you know, the Pyrrhus War, when Macedon tyranny of the whole Greek island was lifted by Romans. They actually freed Greeks, saying that they were freed for all the taxes and all the levies that Macedonians used to put on Greeks, and therefore they were accepted as freers than anybody else. I don't know. That's something somewhere I read.
Well, there were 3 Macedonian wars, and what you describe happened after the First Macedonian War,
Right.
when the Romans said, "No, we believe in the freedoms of the Greeks," and they left. But the Greeks, once the Romans had their foot in there, they had to be involved in every dispute, and it was just kind of inevitable that by the time you get to the Third Macedonian War, that's when they take Polybius captive back to Rome. That's by Aemilius Paulus. And at that point, Aemilius Paulus takes a huge number of Greek slaves. I mean, it's really one of the largest movements of human populations in the ancient world. And so what you say, you know, didn't last. It's absolutely true, but it didn't last.
But also, if we talk even before, the Romans got involved into Sicily prior to that. During the Second Punic War, Marcellus, you know, it's actually, he is also, Plutarch wrote about him, and I was thinking at some point after we go through the Punic War, especially second one, Marcellus took the fight. He fought against the also Hannibal, and he took the fight into Sicily. And you remember the Hannibal was recalled from, he was operating in Sicily for a while. He was recalled. So Marcellus was the one, by the way, who laid the siege to the Syracuse, and eventually took the Syracuse, and that's when the Archimedes was killed. It's was I think 212 or something, 211 to 12 BCE. You know, that's the famous story. You remember how the Archimedes got killed because the Roman soldier, and the Marcellus was the general who took the Syracuse at that time. The Roman soldier comes in and he sees this old man like in his, drawing something in the sand, and he said, "What are you doing? Let's go." He said, "Get the hell out of here! You're interrupting me. I'm busy." And the Roman soldier couldn't tolerate this kind of obnoxious behavior, yeah, and he pulled out the sword and killed him. That's the story that I read, at least. So that's how Archimedes died, and that was during the siege that the Romans took the Syracuse at that time. So yeah, life of Marcellus. Marcellus is pretty interesting character. Well, we should talk about Romans at some point. I don't want to go through the Romans in mythological times, right? We want to go through some Roman.
Romulus, no, we don't need to talk about Romulus.
Yeah. Romulus, Numa Pompilius, even Coriolanus.
But his stuff from the 2nd century.
Right. Yeah, Marcellus
Great.
is a good candidate. Would be. I
Cato
just don't
was
want to do.
great.
Yeah. Yeah, Mark Cato also another one, but yeah, about the same. Yeah, so those two, maybe after we go in our Roman series, we
But
go
you know,
through the
you can see
period.
why Plutarch was so popular. You
Right.
know, I mean, he really tells a really gripping story. I mean, he was
Yeah.
really a very
Right.
popular author, and it's you can see what Shakespeare saw in Plutarch, and he just kind of appropriated all of Plutarch for Julius Caesar and
Coriolanus.
Cleopatra.
Yeah, Coriolanus too. I mean, that's definitely
Right.
He took it the main source for Shakespeare. Yeah. Well, so
Probably
here,
Timon, Prince of Athens, too.
yeah. So anybody wanna say anything? Any comments? Any questions? I know Anusha and Len, you kind of being silent. Anything you'd like to say?
Well, I don't know what to say, but I think we need another one. I like this stuff. I wanna switch a little gears and maybe have something like a light type of. We will discuss Plato. There's a couple of things that he writes about. Homosexuality, Mano or met about the boy, something like that. Like maybe switch gears, and then instead of have a solely explaining great people, what does Plato and others see in sexuality of Romans and Greeks? I mean Greeks in that matter, and he writes quite a lot about it. So maybe somebody wants to take up that subject a month from now. We'll see.
What's the do you know the dialogue?
Yes,
you're referring to?
It's actually, and I'll drop this but it's called Plato's Meno, and it's called the slave boy experiment.
Oh yeah, but it's not about sexuality. It's more about slave boy. He gave him a mathematical task, and when he explained it to him, he kind of like with the logic solved it, and he just wanted to prove that the knowledge is given through migrations of souls, that you're born with the knowledge. You don't have to be even educated, but if you explain it right, you automatically know what the solution is. Because slave boy was uneducated. So I don't know what it has. It's not much. I read Mano fairly recently. I'd say maybe a few months ago. I don't think it's about sexuality. It's about whether nature versus nurture.
Well, I'll read a couple of. So it's called "Mad About the Boy." Plato wrote, "The same-sex lovers were more blessed than ordinary mortals," and then he changed his mind, describing the act as utterly unholy and the ugliest of ugly things. So why were the ancient Greeks so confused about homosexuality, and stuff like that? So
yeah, there might be some minor, mention, like a few phrases here and there. but Meno is not about sexuality. I can tell you this. It's about virtue. The whole thing is about whether virtue is given to you when your soul inhabits your body, or whether you do you could teach virtue to a man. And that's the what the dialogue mostly is about. And there are some mathematical proofs that he's doing with the slave boy to show that the knowledge, and the virtue is the knowledge, kind of you're given with it. You don't need education to if you properly put the question properly, even a slave boy who knows nothing can solve it. So that's so I don't know. We could do the Mano. I think it's an interesting dialogue, but believe me, if there are any mention of sexuality there, they are minor. I have no recollection of that. It was not important in that dialogue.
Greg missed it. Oh my god!
What do you mean I missed it?
No,
But I mean,
No, it was not important.
I mean, this is a much more loaded thing for us now than it was for people in Plato's time. In people in Plato's time, it was no big deal. It was very common. There was no stigma as long as as long as you were still manly, and there was no reason why you shouldn't be. Alexander the Great had a male lover, and no one said boo to Alexander about that.
Hephaestus.
oh wow.
Hephaestus. Yeah. That's the his second in command at some point until he was killed. I mean, that's basically ruined Alexander. After he was not the same man after the death of Hephaestus.
Right.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe there is some other dialogue of where he talks. I mean, in Symposium, he talks about Alcibiades, talks about how he tried to seduce Socrates, but
And that's when Socrates talks about, what we now call platonic love.
right. So yeah. So, but I don't think it's very well. I mean, Symposium was one of the greatest dialogues, I think, of Plato. Besides Republic, I think that's really one of the top. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I haven't read them all. I read a number of them. I wouldn't mind reading Crito. I haven't read that one yet. But if you want to make it a little more attractive for people, and bring a little sex in there, the cheap trick. I don't know.
I just want Odyssey obviously brought a lot of eyeballs. Homer was a big hit. This stuff is a little niche. We like it. Just want to bring more eyeballs and stuff. So something like that, classical stuff that people would like. Obviously not. I don't want to sit here and describe Argonath. I want something that people can read, an adult read, not nothing like for kids. But so I mean maybe do something like that where it's above PG-13, but but not necessarily gross.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, maybe we have to find a good source. Maybe we should read I don't know, the Apuleius. For
Apollonius, the gold.
no. I mean Apuleius, the Golden Ass.
The golden ass.
Yeah, that there is some sexuality there.
Yeah, but it's still not. It's. I mean, it's not. It barely even rises to the level of pornography.
Yes. It's not.
It's hardly pornography.
Right. Yeah. Well, Okay, I
right,
don't know.
I hope I see everybody on Sunday. If not,
Yeah, I'll be away. I'm going to be away for a week.
all right, no problem. Enjoy.
Good night, everybody. Really good
All
job,
right.
Greg. That was a lot of
Okay.
fun.
Yeah,
I never knew
Okay.
about this guy. That was great.
all right.
Yeah, that's I think Marcellus is a good candidate at some point after we go through this history. I don't want to preempt presentations about the Second Punic War, but I think Marcellus would be an interesting character.
Sure. Good night.
All right, take care.